We are officially live. We are so excited to dive into our next edition of our pre-symposium panel. Today, we are here to talk about how to build a culture of accountability. We have an executive symposium coming up next week, February 15th from 5 to 8 p.m. in Austin, Texas, where we are gathering leaders and executives from around the Central Texas area to discuss how to build a culture of accountability. What does that look like? What does it look like to be accountable within the workplace? How do we go about empowering people that are maybe more junior to call out people that are more senior if they're not taking actions that are safe or conducive to being successful or just being accountable in general in the workplace? We've got three great guest panelists with us here today. We've got Adil, we've got Justin, we've got Sean. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves first before we dive into the panel itself, and then we'll dive right into the topic. But if you are interested in coming and joining this executive symposium we've got coming on next week, we will post in the comment section how to RSVP and get involved. But Sean, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Name's Sean Kermath. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing over at HomePoint. HomePoint, we are a luxury home maintenance service. So we become the one number to call for all home needs, big or small.
Very cool. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Justin Garrett. I'm Executive Vice President at Trimbuilt, and we're a 40-year-old local Austin GC, actually celebrating our 40th year in Austin this year. We started as a drywall company, but have moved into general contracting of all kinds. We do work in the public sector and the private sector, ground up and interior finishes as well. I'm just excited to be part of this.
Very cool. And then Adil, how about you?
Hi, thank you. My name is Dr. Adil Dalal. I'm the president of Pinnacle Process Solutions. We focus on global consulting, training, and coaching. Our focus is operational excellence, and we really, enjoy also growing the teams and growing the people. So the human side is very important to us.
Love that. And lastly, I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision is a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality. And when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders, because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. So let's dive into the topic. Anyone can kick off, but topic is how to build a culture of accountability. And I think one thing within accountability is this notion of empowering people, anybody within the organization, to call out others across or above in the organization when they're acting in ways that are not conducive to the business being successful. Oftentimes, I see objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy, meaning that, as we get promoted, as we get to the more senior levels in our organizations, it becomes less likely that other people are going to call us out for behaving or acting in ways that are not conducive to the business's success. But we know that for us, for any business to thrive and for any leaders to succeed, we have to get that objectivity. So I would be curious, from your guys' perspective, what have you found to be an effective way to build that culture of an accountability? And really within that, how do we go about empowering our people to feel comfortable making a call out if they see something unproductive happening within the workplace?
I think it starts honestly with having a really close relationship with everybody that you work with. I think it's important to have an open door policy. I think that when leadership tends to separate themselves from the rest of the team, it creates a distrust and an ability to feel like you can't go and explain, a problem that you have, and can't go and, and share something that you have. I personally really like making sure that I call it a breakfast taco, a burger, or a beer with all of the people on my team as often as possible to talk about their family and to talk about, what's going on in their career. I think that people leave companies, not because of the company itself, but mainly because of the leadership. And I think that if the leadership seems distant, if the leadership seems full of themselves, or unapproachable, then it's really easy when that recruiter calls to pick up the phone and go somewhere else. And I think accountability starts at the top. If you allow bad behavior, if you allow something toxic to happen in the workplace, then it kind of trickles down throughout the whole organization. And I think that's where accountability starts.
I like that. I'm going to ask you more questions about that. But Adil and Sean, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to disagree with that notion that accountability always starts from the top. I mean, was going to echo some similar statements and kind of add on to that. But I think what gets really interesting is like, okay, what does that look like in practice, right? What does an open door policy look like, right? It's nice to say those things, and I've met many leaders who are, say they have an open door policy, and it's not even close to being true. And even if, in my experience, even if you have those tacos or those burgers, and I've experienced this firsthand when, I first started really moving into leadership, and it was a struggle that I had early on was like, how do I get honest opinions from people? And yeah, I might meet their family. I'm almost always getting some sort of filtered opinion from them because they're, at the end of the day, they're worried about their job. They're worried about how they look in front of me. So I think the execution of that is very tricky and difficult.
I love that. That's a really good point. Adil, what are your thoughts on this?
So as leaders grow to the next level, as you correctly pointed out, as they get promoted, there is a little bit of ego is formed, and they try to separate themselves from the pack. And ego is nothing but edging goodness out. So they're edging the goodness out of them. And what is happening is the humility, which is very important for leadership, is lost. And that is one of the issues where people then, the open door policy is just a name, correct? And the culture of accountability is lost there because they are going to give responsibility to a lot of the people without the accountability. They do not give the separation between accountability and responsibility is very critical to understand. And that is where there is a kind of a crossroads which happen. And this is where cultures fall down. And, what I try to do is it starts with the ego. Whenever I have team meetings, whenever I have meetings with the CEO, with the VPs, everyone in the room, my kind of request is leave your titles out of the door. Okay, let's be a team. And that is where we, meeting of minds happens there. So.
Cool, I like that, Adil. I've got my first point of disagreement. I immediately wrote this down, Justin, when you said open door policy. I don't believe in open door policies. Now, I like the concept of open door policies, but what I found is that a literal open door policy means that I must drop what I'm doing to be fully, perfectly present for whomever's opening my door or walking through my door at any given moment in time. And that's not what I found to be conducive for being productive or for just getting work done. There's some research from Cal Newport on deep work, and he talks about the pitfalls of multitasking. And if I'm like laser focused on one thing and then someone comes walking through my door to distract me to focus on something else, I build up mental residue and it's really hard to jump back into that other task. But the concept of open door policy is, I think, really valuable. Just the sense of like, hey, we've got dedicated time where I can listen to you, understand where you're coming from, ask you questions, be curious, and clarify where you're coming from. And I think that's where you're going with that, Justin. But I think the like literal concept of an open door policy, I'm not a big fan of, because I think it detracts from focus and I don't know, intentional time.
Well, and to go further with what I was talking about, I had scheduled regular time on my calendar that everybody knows was part of that open door time, so that I was able to focus, right, and not have anything interrupt that. And that was important, because you're correct, you could get interrupted at all the time. But the policy is, if the door is open, I'm open to talk. If the door is not open, then I'm having, a conversation or in a meeting and need some focus time.
No, I like that. That makes sense.
If I can jump in, Garrett,
jump in.
What happens with, I worked in a lot of organizations where it's a clean room environment, or there's a separation between where the office is and they cannot get any contaminants into the office. So I worked in those environments. And I find it difficult for people to come into your office and talk to you. So what I prefer is the MBO method, management by walking around, or MWO, correct? You walk around, you say hi to people, don't disturb them, but, chit chat, when you need. So on a Friday, if you have a certain time when you walk around and you gather the kind of the intelligence from them as what they feel is the good, bad, and ugly in the organization. I think it's a very valuable tool, and I've learned it from one of my previous presidents I work in. Every Friday, he would be walking around and I would say, why is he wasting his time? But man, that guy knew what he was doing. So learn from the best.
Sean, you brought up a really good point about execution, especially when building a culture of accountability, can be really difficult. One, I guess maybe the first question within this is, how can we go about identifying the pitfalls of hypocrisy? Because I think like most executives, most leaders would think like, okay, I've read the books, I understand, we want to build a culture of accountability, we want to have empathy, we want to be able to be there for our team, have curiosity. But in reality, and to Adil's point earlier about ego, sometimes egos can get in the way, sometimes just inconvenience. I think ultimately inconvenience gets in the way, and our own human nature of prioritization can get in the way as well. Like what we think is most important gets trumped over things that probably are more important in terms of a team culture. How can we go about catching ourselves when we're talking the talk but not walking the walk? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely. That's what cultures are built on.
I mean, I think it comes down to systems, right? You know, there are, so like here, I'll answer, like, I'll give my perspective on, I think, how this can happen, right? So, and I'll give specific examples for my current company. So I think we're all on the same page here that company culture has to be led from the top. I think that's a fairly obvious point. On the flip side, you have to hire for it as well, right? And these things have to be consistent, right? You can't just like put these values on your website and say them. You have to build a system, a process around that. So here, and this is the best example, best culture of accountability that I've ever seen is at this current company, and how that looks. And what John, the founder and CEO, did is from day one, he every Friday meeting is all about accountability. That's all we talk about. It is broken out into wins, right? Shout outs, lessons that we've learned, infractions, so things that we've done wrong that are against our process. And he's constantly iterating why we're doing this, right? Why we do this. And he will be the first person in all these meetings, if he's made an infraction, to be like, this is what I did wrong. This is where I failed the company. And here's how we learn from it. And the why is right so that we all get better, all of these get organized, and then help future employees, right? And we've gotten to a point now here where people are putting in their own infractions, right? They come to the meeting with their own mistakes. They're not waiting for somebody else to voice their infraction. And then again, so that's the process here. And I'm not claiming that's the best process by no means, but I can just tell you that it's been effective here. But you have to have the right hires, the right employees. And this company really truly values culture hires over skill hires. Most skills can be learned, right? So if someone has some of the base information, they have the base skills, like we can teach them about how to do X, Y, and Z. What I can't do is really teach somebody in an effective manner how to be humble, how to have integrity. So our whole interview process, all of our questions are around digging out those core values and really, being like, hey, yeah, this person talked about his experience, but how does this relate to our core value of being humble? How does that experience relate to him going above and beyond? And if we don't get those check boxes, regardless if they have 15 years in the field, they don't get hired. So company culture, you can't just snap your fingers and it's just created. It's constant. You have to have a system in place to make it work. So I know that's not really exactly the question you answered, but that's how I would solve for the problem, because I've seen it work here.
No, I like that. And I think what you bring up a really interesting point about like coming to the table with your learning lessons, or like your areas that you maybe made a mistake. I think that's really intriguing. I think the intriguing part to me is, one, the hiring process and the ability to build psychological safety or security to come to that. Because at the end of the day, as the CEO, I can come to the table with all of my failures. None of them are fireable because I am the judge, jury, and executioner. But as someone who's not the CEO of the company, you got to be you got to walk that tightrope of feeling comfortable to admit your mistakes and know that this is not necessarily a fireable mistake. Justin, I'd love to learn from your perspective. How do you go about like helping people feel comfortable bringing up some of those points and feeling comfortable to bringing up those points?
I think one, as I always like to make sure that I'm not the smartest person in the room. And I like to always talk about, past mistakes or past failures that I've had, to kind of make it clear that it's okay to admit fault or admit, that there's a mistake. And I think that in these days and times, it's lost a lot on apologizing for things. I think that there's so often this resistance to just coming to someone when you make a mistake and saying, I apologize. I made a mistake. This is, what I could have done differently. And owning that as a leader is so important. I think that if there's a culture where the leadership never admits fault, never admits there's a mistake, never apologizes, then it makes it really difficult to expect anybody that reports to them to be honest. So many times in construction, I've been in construction 24 years. When talking to a project manager or superintendent or, listening in on one of their meetings afterwards, pulling them aside and saying, hey, by the way, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this is something that happened to me. This is a mistake that I made. I want you to, be aware of it and not make the same mistake. I think helps a lot with opening up, and making people feel comfortable, about sharing. But I think the other side of it is, you do have to be one-on-one with these people on a regular basis and seem intentional about that. And, remember, what sports their kids are in, or remember that their wife had a job change, and getting to know them on a personal level really allows people to feel comfortable, doing that. And I've been very fortunate over 24 years in this business that I've gotten to work with people even when I've moved companies, because we've just enjoyed working together and they wanted, to come, work wherever I work. And so I think it's more about being a family, than it is being a ruler and being right, all the time.
Man, Justin, I like it. I love what you said about apologizing. I do think the ability to apologize as a leader is probably one of the most powerful things one can do. I think sometimes there's this somewhere in a leadership book, someone once wrote, oh, leaders must be stoic, never apologize for anything. And like everyone took it as the gospel. And I can tell you, I totally agree with you. I think the ability for a leader to own their mistakes and say, I messed that up, I apologize, I think goes a really long way to accountability and trust.
Yeah, 100%.
But within that, I guess what I'd be curious to know, how do you distinguish between what's a fireable offense and what's a learnable offense?
Well, I'll take this because it's important to me. I don't think that you can fire anybody without telling them they've done something wrong in the first place.
Sure.
And I think that, a lot of times it's not necessarily about somebody doing something, that's a mistake. If it's obviously it's intentional, that's a different situation. But so many times it's just a matter of coaching, and it's a matter of making sure that they're on the right seat on the bus. Obviously, there's a business book that that talks a lot about right seat on the bus. I'm a big fan of it. But there's so many times where I have moved somebody from being an estimator to a project manager, or being a superintendent to a project manager, or being an estimator to an accountant, because they just believe that they were supposed to be in that position, when in reality they have a skill set that is much better suited for another position in the company. But it's identifying those things and having those conversations, honest conversations with them about that. Now, of course, we all know of situations where something was, somebody said something inappropriate or did something inappropriate, or, just blatantly negligent, that, is a fireable offense. But I believe everybody deserves a second chance. And everybody deserves an opportunity to be, sat down and explain what happened, give them a course, of action that you'd like them to take, help map out, what you want that to look like moving forward. And then if they fail, that's a different story. But I think everybody deserves a chance to, be sat down, have a real open conversation, get feedback from them too. Because a lot of times you'll learn that they either didn't know something, they did not get the training that you thought that they did. And so they're making the mistake because no one ever trained them. No one ever took the time to explain something to them. So that's my side of it.
So if I can jump in, there was a scenario when one of the manufacturing operators put his hand into a hopper. This is a injection molding process for making preforms, which makes your plastic bottles. He put his hand in the hopper, and then he put a switch to close that off, and his finger got cut off. There was a sign out there which said, "Do not put your hand in." The CEO wanted to fire him. Okay, so I was their lean sensei, and I was asked to intervene and say, the HR came to me and said, "Should we fire this person?" And I said, "Okay, let me look at I did the 5 why." And when I actually went to the details, what was happening was this person was not given the right tools. The plastic was forming into a clump, and he was given a hanger and a screwdriver to try to break that apart. What would a screwdriver do to a piece of plastic? It would just go up and down. So he didn't have the tools. He had to put his hand in because otherwise the production would stop. So basically, this person had no other option. So if we do not give them the tools, if we do not give them what is needed, and we make them responsible for keeping production up, now who's at fault? It's not a human level fault. It is not a process level. It is a process level fault, but mostly it's a system level fault. So how we corrected it was really, immediately gave them the right tools. He was in the hospital for a couple of days. That was his suspension. He came back to work, and we saved his job. So we have to look at what our systems are and how leaders are responsible for some of the failures. That is the problem, is they're not looking at the system level failure. It's easy to blame someone and catch the slowest person and say, "You're responsible for that." And that is what happens a lot of the times in organizations.
Sean, do you have any thoughts on that whole notion of distinguishing between fireable and learnable offenses?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is always been around, is this person showing willingness and continuing to try to improve, right? That's always been it for me. Like, it isn't about like, did they make mistake once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, right? Like, is there a path to improvement, right? And are we working towards it together? Because I don't think there's ever been a mistake that's happened under my remit that I didn't have some level of control on. I don't think it's ever happened, right? And I think this goes to Dale's point either, is like there's always something that is causing this almost inevitably, unless, of course, again, it's caveat, unless it's something truly malicious and evil, then that's a different story. But even then, probably there was something I could do to help prevent it. So whether that be my hiring process. So yeah, for me, it's the willingness of coachability that's really important to me, and somebody's showing improvement or trying to improve and wanting to keep coming back to me and being open to coaching. As long as that's happening, I'm never getting upset. Never.
I like that. I think all of your guys' perspectives are very interesting. And Adil, that was a really powerful story about people aren't here just willingly chopping off their fingers. They were trying to do the best they could with the pressures that were put on them, and they made choices. So I really appreciate the accountability around the process. But Sean, you brought up this point about skills versus culture hires a couple times now. I'd love to learn really where everybody sits on this skills versus culture hire thought process. And how can we go about building a better process for hiring? And I ask that because I think, Adil, you brought up ego before. I think ego is one of the biggest areas that leaders struggle with when it comes to making hiring decisions, because we think we're a really good judge of character in an interview process, when it's sometimes really hard to know how someone's going to perform from however many hours of interviews that you do with them for a job that's got nothing to do with the actual interview process itself, or being on a Zoom call or in person or whatever you end up doing for the interview. So how do you go about identifying really great talent and I guess making a good cultural and skill fit and hire for that whole process? Like, I guess, how do you guys view the culture versus skill debate? One, and two, if you're like, oh, we hire for culture, how do you go about identifying that? And how do you also go about having the self-awareness to recognize when maybe you've made a wrong decision in hiring? And how do you learn, like, what's your audit process for improving the hiring process when you realize you made a bad hire?
What a layered question there, Garrett.
Sorry, super layered question. I personally can relate to this.
No, it's a great question and very, very insightful.
Who wants to jump in?
I can jump in. So I'm just going to build on what Sean said is the values piece, correct? So when I do mission vision for a company, I always do the values with it, because as we are hiring, we are trying to check the box of are they meeting some of the core values. But the key thing about hiring, which I look for, is the passion. I can teach them skills. I can teach them everything. I have a training program which will put them through that, but I can never teach them passion. And the people who are without the passion are immediately out, no matter what their qualifications. If they're not going to be passionate, if they're not going to be there 100% every day, then I don't think that would be a good fit for any organization, correct? I mean, I want them there, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, everything. And that is what I look for when I'm hiring. And again, as you said, we all make mistakes, correct? And I've made those mistakes of hiring the wrong person because, sometimes it's my own decision, sometimes it's coming from above me, and I have no way to, say no to that. But one of my HR buddies, who was the director of HR for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, said, Adil, keep the separation immediate. If you feel it's a wrong fit, the separation should be immediate, because the pain will be felt for a very long time. And that is one of my weak points, is I too soft to let people go. I try to keep them on and give them the benefit of doubt for a couple of times. And sometimes it is, I think the person who gave me that advice was absolutely right. So sorry to say that.
Justin, what are your thoughts on culture versus skills fit in terms of hiring process?
Well, I was with one of my counterparts that runs another construction company in town yesterday for lunch, and he was talking specifically about how difficult it is that you can get kids right out of college with a construction science degree that have checked all the boxes, right? They've taken the classes, they've made good grades, but you're still hiring them, and they're right out of school. And they come to all of us and they say, well, I'm ready for this next position. I'm ready for this next, move. And then you lay out for them, what your expectations are to make that next move. Let's say from project engineer to assistant project manager. One of the things that I'm always looking for is exactly what he was talking about with, drive and ambition. So one of the questions that I always ask anytime I'm hiring for any position is, what have you built and what that you enjoyed the most, and what do you want to build? Because I'm looking for them to talk about, and a lot of times people think it's that they want to hear me say they want to build a skyscraper or they want to build an office building. I'm actually looking for what do they want to build in their home, or what do they want to build, in their community. And so that helps me a lot, with the culture question, because I believe that servant leadership is so important, and that every time somebody comes to me and asks for a promotion, a raise or whatever, I say, what are you doing in the community? How are you involved in your local community? How are you involved in giving back? And whether that's in your kid's school, or that's in some organization that you're passionate about, or a charitable organization, and need to see that you're giving of your time with no expectation of anything in return. Other than you're just giving of your time. And I think that's so important in the culture piece, and in finding out about somebody when you're, talking about bringing them onto your team, is, are they willing to do something that is free, that's not going to, gain them, anything from a monetary, standpoint. But servant leadership starts at the top. I believe that everybody that's leading in an organization needs to be spending a lot of time giving back in their community, giving back in organizations, serving on committees, and showing that you're doing that actively, so that when you're encouraging others to do that, they can just see that you're doing it. And I think that's so important, is giving back.
I have a problem with the word servant leadership. I don't know why, but that word triggers me a little bit, because when is the last time you listen to a servant when we're making a strategic decision for your family, correct? So when there is strategy involved and big decisions involved, servant leadership tends to go out of the door, correct? So for me, that word has to be done very carefully. It is a great, kind of theoretically, it sounds extremely good and very nice, but when you go into actual practice, it is one of the most difficult things to do. So because here you are, again, that ego piece comes into play, correct? How am I going to listen to the janitor of the organization when I'm at the CEO level? There are 15 levels separating us, and am I going to listen to him to make the strategic decision to buy another company? Correct? So that is where I'm coming from. Any thoughts, Sean, or just?
I chuckle. I just think, have you guys ever seen the TV show Arrested Development?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's this, it's a funny TV show, came out in the early 2000s, and it's about this dysfunctional family that owns a business, and one of the sons is going to step up into the CEO spot, and the only thing he's obsessed with is a suit. He's like, "Are you trying to tell me the guy in the $15,000 suit is about to take advice from the janitor or from the people sitting at the conference table?" And it's that. I'm being facetious. It's way over the top. It's very funny, but it goes to show your point, Adil, that oftentimes I think ego can creep up on you and can creep up on leaders because of our status and because of how other people treat us. I think, like, if objectivity diminishes the higher we go in any organizational hierarchy, and all of a sudden, because of that, more people are likely to be like, "That's a great idea," even when it's a crappy idea, because we're the emperor with no clothes now. How can we go about, like, actually realistically checking our ego as we move up the organization?
And I totally agree that the word servant leadership is thrown out a lot, and it is misused a lot. But I think that there are ways to actually be a servant, not only in your community, and in your home, but in business. And that is genuinely caring about people, but also genuinely being willing to do something that others in the organization might think is beneath your title. I always hate that, right? But there's so many opportunities daily, whether it's doing the dishes in the office or seeing that one of your team members is working late and coming in and helping them, or finding out that somebody is overburdened and being willing to help do some menial task that just takes some load off of their plate. Those are opportunities for true servant leadership and opportunities to truly step in, and do that. And yes, the term is thrown around a lot. The word culture is thrown around a lot, and misused a lot. But I think that there are real opportunities to serve, and if it's genuine and people can see that you're doing it on a regular basis, whether people are watching or not, is a way to build the kind of culture that we all hope for in our offices and where we work.
Yeah, culture. The one thing that always kind of is always a painful thing to me when I'm seeing interviews or companies they talk about how important their culture is, and you just don't believe it anymore. Like I can't remember the last time I believed even this job coming in here, when he was telling me how great the culture was, immediately my eyes rolled back. I mean, not actually, but it got struck through my decision process pretty quickly, because I that's all you hear about. And I think the really important question for me is always like, okay, now that I've actually experienced a place that has good culture and said they had good culture, how do you actually cut through the noise of that? And I don't know the answer to that question.
So can I ask a question here? Sorry, Garrett, I'll take your
jump in. Ask a question.
So what is culture? What is culture to you? How do you define culture?
I would define culture as what people in the organizations are saying about the company when they are not asked to be interviewed by someone in that organization. Essentially, what they're saying about the company with their family, with their friends, outside of work. That's what I think culture is. Like, it's something where people are not doing this because they're being asked to do it, but because they want to do it, because they truly feel connected to the company and the mission of the business and what they're trying to achieve.
Okay.
That's how I mean, that's spitballing it right off the top of my head. How I define culture is how people feel about it. Yeah.
I always talk about it as it's behaviors that are rewarded and behaviors that are allowed, versus behaviors that are not allowed and behaviors that are not rewarded. In a company, really controls a lot of the culture. And so if you have something toxic going on, then you're allowing that culture to permeate through the rest of the organization. Or if you're allowing a person to be inappropriate or do something wrong on a consistent basis, then you're allowing that to be the culture. And so I think culture can be seen a lot just by watching, what's going on, as much as it's being talked about. Like Sean said, I agree 1,000% that the word culture is thrown out so much, so easily. And half the time you listen to it, you go, oh, that's just a buzzword that's being thrown out. But I think culture is a pattern of behaviors that are accepted or encouraged, that starts from the top, but that goes all the way through.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Sure.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever gotten this question before, and I'm glad I had some time to think through it. So the whole time you were talking, I really wasn't listening. I was like, God,
yeah, I saw your gears moving.
Yeah, so I think I've come up with what my first reaction to that to be is, because it really, culture feels like it's really just the personality of the company, right? So like when you ask like what is somebody's personality, right? So I think it's really the personality of the company, and what that is really just a collection of what beliefs and attitudes that every other person brings to the table. So is company culture really just the personality of the company that is synthesized from the employees?
This is a very core question, right? Why I asked is because when a leader asks me that, my answer to them is very simple. It's what your people do when you're not there. It's the actions they take when the leader is not around, and that is what true culture is about. Because they can fake it. When you're around, when you're watching, they're going to fake it. When you're there, they're there till 6 o'clock in the evening, not doing anything, but just, the FaceTime is so important nowadays. But when you're not there, what happens? And that is the key to your culture. And that is why what I've done is, culture is an esoteric term. And, I've actually created a game where you can actually see what your culture looks like in the current state and the future state. So this is so important for people to understand, is they need to have a visual of their culture. And if they do not have that, all is lost. Because, to me, culture and your success are extremely intertwined, correct? And there is studies, I can show you a lot of studies, which clearly show that there is a very strong correlation between a strong culture and your success in the market. So
I like it. That's interesting. Guys, this has been a really interesting conversation. The last question, I always like to ask everybody I have on a panel this question, because I think it's intriguing and I like to learn everyone's thoughts to this. But the question I love to ask is, what's a popular belief about leadership that you disagree with? So when I say what's a popular belief about leadership, I mean, you think over 50% of leaders would say, I believe in this, and you say, I don't believe in this.
Sean, you should go first this time.
Less time to think, Sean.
Yeah, we'll let Sean go first.
Yeah, you're on to me now. So I think my answer is a little off the beaten path of your question, but I think it might ruffle some feathers. So I have a massive bone to pick with 30, 60, 90-day plans that every leader is asked to do. I've been doing them my whole career. I think almost every company I've worked for has asked some sort of version of it. And I hate them. Would be a little hyperbolic here. I think they are absolutely worthless. They end up all looking the same, right? Some version of listen, execute, measure, right? And there's some variations, but and here's where I think they start to fall down, apart from the fact that they all kind of generally look the same, is even if you put some sort of unique sort of strategies into them, in my experience, 80-90% of anything you thought of as far as like a specific actionable strategy, once you actually get into the field and start playing, you're way off, or it needed to be heavily modified. And moreover than that, when I come from a lot of startups, a decade of startups now, if I spent 30 days just listening, that would be a death sentence, right? I would be instantly fired. So I've never thought they were very good, and I've never understood why they get asked. And I think as a to pose a solution right away, and as you can kind of get a sense from me, I'm a big fan of systems, right? I want a system of executing, a system of listening, a system of reporting, right? So I think there's a lot of answers on what maybe is an alternative to a 30-60-90, but what I have really come to adopt and love is, I've created essentially a flywheel, right? Instead of, them, hey, Sean, what's your 30-60-90? I'm like, no, you're not getting a 30-60-90. But what I will tell you is, here is the way I work. Here's the way I operate. Here's how we will figure out how to execute. Here's how we will listen. And here's how we'll report. And it's not necessarily defined by 30 days this, 60 days this, 90 days that.
That's a good one. It's a good one because I think I disagree with it.
Yeah. Great. We're off to a good start.
Yeah, no, it's a good one
There you
because I see what you're saying. I think, but this whole issue with 30-60-90 goes completely with like your ethos of everything you said before, of like hiring the right people, which means that you can trust that you've got the right people in the right seats to get the work done. And that if you've got them following a system that they've figured out a way to pass to your, efficacy of whatever you've defined as success, like makes tons of sense. And I could see why you'd have an issue with it. My personal disagreement is I think sometimes that getting to that level of competency, I think takes time, and having some milestones that at least you have an experimental approach around, like, hey, we got milestones. This is what we like. This is our hypothesis. We think in 30 days we can be here, with the ability to judge that, I think is helpful. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of 30, 60, 90-day goals are wildly off the train tracks, very immediately, because we have hypotheses that we have not tested yet. Cool.
We might be saying the same thing here. And I think can I try to understand what you said here a little bit more? So you're saying, hey, like trying to ask someone for a flywheel or some system of belief is maybe too difficult of a question. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, yeah, I think in theory, having a system for like saying, hey, this is how we're defining success. These are the activities. These are the ways that we listen. This is the ways we ask questions, whatever it may be, for whatever type of role we're looking to build and grow within our organization. I think, one, teaching those systems can be really, really difficult, like easier like said than done. And then two, I think testing whether or not someone's effectively gotten to that level where they're capable to do that is also difficult as well. I think if you can effectively do that, like that's the ideal, but I think it's really, really hard. And I've not seen it consistently done.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you on any of those points. I guess I don't want to go back and forth too much with you here, but like my problem with anything that is like, in my opinion, like, hey, I'm asking for something and I'm not going to like it no matter what, is not a good excuse to me, right? That's not an excuse. Like, I don't ever want to ask for something if I know that it's going to be completely worthless. And I want to always strive to find something that's actually going to be valuable. And I'm not saying necessarily what I've got figured out is absolutely correct or the best way always, but all I can tell and all I know is that I think 30-60-90s provide almost no value. And I would much rather ask somebody for something that they're going to whiff on than something that we're just going to throw away after 2 days of working together. So I guess that would be kind of my response if I'm understanding your objection correctly.
I get it. But I guess my counter to it would be, maybe then we could build a system to effectively teach people how to iterate 30, 60, 90-day goals in an effective way that is useful.
I would accept that.
Cool. I like it. All right, Justin, Adil, what's a popular belief about leadership you disagree with?
Well, I was going to say there's two things. One is I think that 50% or more of leaders that I either know or have worked with believe that they have to have the right answer, or they have to come up with the right answer. And that's always driven me crazy, because I'm always trying to train, mentor, bring up the next person up to take my seat. And I believe that you've got to have people that are smarter than you in the room, and then asking them what they think about problems and things that arise, and getting their opinions, and then giving them credit when they come up with those solutions is so important. And I just have seen so many times where the leader feels like they have to solve every problem, they have to have the right answer, and it has to come from them. And I think that that's untrue. And I think that you need to have a good team, a smart team around you. You need to be able to bring them in and ask them, how to help solve problems with you, and give them credit, and be okay with and comfortable with saying, hey, that was Bob's idea or Sally's idea. I'm throwing out hypothetical names, but giving credit and allowing them to lead. I think that so many times leaders feel like that they have to be the only one that leads because of their title and won't allow someone else to step up, and lead, as part of that. So
cool.
That's fine.
That makes sense. No, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of leaders wouldn't like readily say they need to know all the answers, but I think in practice they do say, like, people often do what they say, and initially practice an inquisitive approach to leadership. So I think you're right. I think that's a really good point. Adil, how about you?
I'm going to take a higher level look at leadership, and I'm going to make a shocking statement saying that leadership is broken today. Correct. At a global level, leadership, all the models, participative, transactional, transformational, are old age. Okay. To me, LEAD, LEAD stands for leave everything appreciated on departure. Okay. How many leaders are doing that today? How many leaders are thinking about it's all short term? Correct? As you correctly pointed out, 30, 60, 90 days. How can I, put a Band-Aid, move on to the next position? And that is the worst thing you do to an organization. That is the worst thing you do to a country. That is the worst thing you do to a planet, correct? Social media, what has it done to our people today? What is the impact on mental health? Social media, people have made billions of it. But what is the ultimate? Have they left this world better? And we're coming into the age of AI. Who is thinking about how AI is going to impact our brains? Do you know the impact on a human brain with what is going to happen? These are things when we talk about generational shifts, our model of leadership needs to change immediately. If we do not do that, we are in for a root shock. And so, sorry, I'm going to put it very bluntly, but this is my feeling. And I have built new models of leadership. I have done that. And it is something we all need to start focusing on, because this is not your problem or my problem. This is a global issue. So,
yeah, Adil, I think what you say brings up a really good point. I mean, I don't know. I think we've all seen it in the news about what's going on with Boeing, and you would imagine there's probably not a strong culture of making call outs for when things are not done properly. I mean, shoot, when you've got like holes that are misproperly drilled into doors and doors flying off the hinges while on a air flight, it's pretty scary stuff. And I mean, it speaks to a lack of accountability of people feeling empowered to say, hey, this is messed up. Or, you'll read an article that says, oh yeah, this subcontractor that Boeing hired had said that there were issues with it, but they still sent the planes out anyways. It's like, that's a problem. And yeah, no, Adil, I think what you shared brings up a really good point about accountability. And
one more thing is, we're getting the productivity and we're not seeing the impact on the human side. I just delivered a keynote address in Dubai on stress. The stress levels of, Harvard Medical School has said 50% of our people are going to be having some kind of a mental episode or will be under stress. And I'm telling you that number is very low. I'm going to predict that, very soon 90 to 95% of this population, because everyone is adopting the Western model. And we know what that does to us, And on a global scale, US stress levels are 20% higher than the rest of the world. And if they're going to adopt our model, what is going to happen around the world? And I teach in 5 continents. I know I've met with leaders. I know what is happening. And I'm really worried about that. I really sincerely am concerned what we are doing to human beings, because when you put someone under stress, actually their productivity decreases, their mental capacity decreases, they will make more mistakes. I had a leader which I work with, Lonnie Carpenter, in Stryker Corporation, and he was one of the best leaders. One of the things I liked is created a very fun environment. We really had fun under him. He would give you accountability, but he would give you complete freedom to do what you do. Mistakes, he would cover it. He would basically not blame you for the mistakes. He would take the accountability for it. But, the environment he created, the mistakes were very less, and we knew that he had your back. So this is the type of environment, is how do we create a fun-loving environment? Because when you do that, your brain actually works in a different way. From the neuroscience point of view, the dopamine kicks in. There are things which happen in your brain where productivity and other things are at the next level. And leaders are not thinking about that. And that is what we need to start looking at as we go forward. So
Cool. I love it. Sean, Adil, Justin, thanks for being here. This has been a great pre-symposium panel. I've really enjoyed this dialogue. This has been a lot of fun. If anybody watching this is interested in meeting these three great gentlemen, come to our executive symposium next week, February 15th, 5 to 8 p.m. We're hosting it at the Marketplace ATX on the corner of Burnett and Anderson. We'd love to see you there. I'll post info on how to RSVP in the comments. Thanks for your time, guys.